be our featured reader, Eiléan Ní Chuilleanáin. Eiléan has an illustrious career in the arts, a lot of accomplishments. Has been a lecturer at Trinity from 1966 to 2011. Has been the Ireland Professor of Poetry, has 12 collections of poetry, shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize, has won the International Griffin Prize, and her last book, Mother House, from the Gallery Press, received the Irish Times Poetry Now Award. So could we have a big warm round of applause, please, for Eiléan Ní Chuilleanáin.
Oh, that's better. Excuse me. It all looked a bit strange. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for showing the film, and particularly thank you to whoever set up the sound, because I've seen that film 3 times with very different effect and that was really, really good, and it was wonderful to hear McNara's voice. When do you want me to stop? When do I stop?
Half an hour.
Half an hour, okay. I might go a little bit less than half an hour. Okay, I'm going to start with my Nano Nagle poems because of where we are. And I wrote a bunch of poems about her going on for 10 years ago now, but this is the one that it particularly refers to this place, but also to Nano Nagle's resistance to the idea of being locked up and cloistered, and that seems to me to be an important part of what she's left us. An imperfect enclosure for Nano Nagle. She was out in all weathers. She was tired. Someone gave her a chair in a shop, rested, and then away in the street on the move. The house she built first, giving on the street. Could she close up doors and windows on that side? It would be noticed as a convent. She asked to be buried in the common cemetery. They broke through the wall of the nuns' graveyard and slipped her coffin inside, but she would not stay, so they built her a stone tomb nearer to Cove Lane and opened a latch at one end so hands can touch the coffin. Well, as you possibly know, she's been moved again since I wrote that poem, so she remains on the go, which is a wonderful thing. I'm going to read one more poem from this collected poems, and this one is called Intimations, because it's about music, and one of the things that I greatly enjoy about going to concerts is the moment beforehand when everybody is tuning up and somebody is waiting to perform. In particular, I was watching a singer waiting for the off, I suppose, was the wonderful thing about what she was doing. It's called Intimations. The first harsh cough out of the pipe, and then a violin tuning over and over, those twisting harmonies. They're clearing the way. The switching of the bow down close to the screw, each vacillating, scratching note probes into the old sore spot, patiently revisiting. No music until that painful overture. Not yet, is what they are saying, with the shiver among the strings, the bassoon vibrating, and a tread everywhere marching, getting closer now. Light on the singer, she stands ignoring a loose curl of hair blown across her neck. Her breath comes quiet, shallow inside that extravagant bodice. Not yet. The deep inhalation and the opening high note. How long to wait for the liberating glance? How long do I have? Do I seem trapped on the edge? Will I ever step away? But this is the moment she loves, even if it wears patience to listen to the flutes quavering. We want blood and arias, and the big scene in the graveyard where she rises from the tomb and sings loud enough, long enough to send them all scuttling home to silence. Now, I'm going to read mainly from this book, The Map of the World, which has only just come out, and I gather has not yet reached the Cork bookshops, but I'm sure it will. This one is called St. Bridget's Well, and I was asked to write a poem for the new holiday, St. Bridget's Day. Apparently, I'm going to read it in Beijing this year on St. Bridget's Day. But this was a couple of years ago. It was actually during the lockdown. And I thought I want to find places associated with St. Bridget. And Mary Mangan told me that there was a St. Bridget's Well in Clondalkin. So I went there. I also went to a couple of other St. Bridget's Wells and other holy wells, indeed, in County Kildare. But this one was the one where I heard what seemed to me to be a fairly extraordinary statement, and I put it into the poem. It's also slightly a Cork poem. It just has a couple of references to Lover's Walk and the things that come back to me when I start writing a poem, memories of childhood and so on. When I asked the way to the well, people knew what I meant, and at last I found the place. There was a tree with rosary beads and white paper twisted around the branches. I watched a girl who arrived just after me, wearing pink trousers and bright red sandals. She came in from the road. She stood and prayed and reached out, stroking a stone, then moved a few feet to the right and did it all again. Just there, the path was a short cut from the road to the houses. People passed with their shopping, heading home. One woman with a child. I heard her saying to the child walking along in her school uniform, "It's for all the little babies that passed away." I wrote her words down that same evening to be sure I had the truth. It was 3 p.m, Wednesday in the month of June, that I caught her answer to the question I didn't hear, in among the voices, the cars on the road, the soft slap of the sandals the silent visitor wore, the children coming from school. Well, I thought, who needs apparitions? But they came anyway, in spite of me, rising like steam out of a dark patch on the road, or matched with a burning smell from a dark patch on an old door. If I wanted a map that would just show the wells, the culverted streams, the short cuts, they came, they congregated, they insisted. What about the wall where the girls played 1, 2, 3 O'Leary? They said. I said, why do you want me to put that in? Or Lover's Walk, they said. I gave them back their stare. What about the swan, said I. I saw her just now in my search, so close to me, through a gap in a high wall. Her head, her bending neck, white feathers of one wing. How could she nest up there and seem at ease? But when I turned to leave the dead end behind and come down again beside the factory wall, I heard the mill stream splashing downhill inside its prison pipe, out of the brimming pond that I had not seen. Could I have forgotten the excess of water, the excess of all the stories I might have heard as I searched for St. Bridget's Well? This one is called Muriel Gifford After Her Fever. Muriel Gifford her sister's name is somewhat better known, Grace Gifford, but Muriel married Thomas MacDonagh, so both of them married men who were executed in 1916. And this poem really comes from an oral tradition. I remember my mother telling me about this incident when she was ill and they wanted to cut her hair off, and her husband intervened and combed her hair out for her. I've never seen this written down, but I think it must have been my grandmother, who knew them all well, who told my mother about it. It was my mother who told me. So Muriel Gifford, after her fever. The other thing about Muriel was she drowned 1 year after her husband's death. She went swimming in Skerries and was drowned. Fluttering, coiling, a strand of hair, a phrase, a tune remembered, not name. Is it called fever? The weariness that comes after fever, even too weak to brush my hair. The mass of tangles at my neck, like the leaves blown into a corner, piled by a feverish wind. The long strand of memory, twisted and blended, entwines around my hand, holding the brush, and the story my grandmother knew catches. My mother told me she gave her the way to untwist the long tangled locks of hair. In those days, they cut your hair off if you'd had a fever, but Muriel's hair was lovely. Her husband prevented them cutting. He sat beside her and used the tip of the comb, carefully combing all the way down, slowly stroking every long hair free, until she could wind it again, twisted in plaits and piled up as she chose. When I finish my hair, I'm too weak to begin the day, putting on your heavy carved ring with its dark green stone, and my mother's ring on the other finger. My hand feels light, something swept away as they were swept by the firing squad and the stifling, coiling wave. I'll read the first poem in this book, which is called The Miracles. Again, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, Magdara and I went in Italy to visit his sister who lives near Verona, but also near Mantova. And they brought us into Mantova, and then just outside the city to a church. We went there, we went inside, and Shivra, my sister-in-law, said to us, "Now, wait, don't look up, now look up." And we looked up and we saw these extraordinary images, I suppose, but they were actually three-dimensional. They were wooden statues. And what they were the offerings that various people had made hundreds of years ago because they were saved by the intervention of the Blessed Virgin Mary from truly awful fates. And the statues showed that. They showed a man with his neck in a wooden thing, and another man standing beside him with a great big lump hammer, another man about to be dropped down a well, another man with a rope around his neck. I wanted to put one of these images on the cover of the book, but everybody agreed that they were too horrible. But it was so moving to see how they had made these images, which were called what the Italians called arte povera, the art of poverty. They were just made out of bits of wood and presumably their own second-hand clothes. Now, I have to say that the firm of Benetton about 20 years ago intervened and dressed them all again, but still in very humble clothing. It was an extraordinary sight. It's called Santa Maria delle Grazie if you ever find yourself near it. And I had to write this poem called The Miracles for Shievra Woods and Antonio Piacenza. Coming out of a country where empty houses lay open to the weather, sheep in the entry, weedy graveyards, the foxes cry at night their only music, the bridge, the shifting planks, greased with the season's flattened leaves, as frost loosened its grasp. Then on the far side, withered grass trampled, the briar hedge where ice lingered underneath. I could not have made it up. How, in the tall church, beside the wide, calm river, a short walk from the city walls, the poor, whose luck once seemed to have definitely run out, had made, from wooden spars and their own old clothes, the image of deliverance, the moment when the Virgin interfered just as the torturer was ready to start work, or the rope broke. The reprieve made it across the slippery bridge in time, even though the clock had been put forward so it would come too late. Thronging the walls, these puppets of misfortune, not the natural kind, like a mad bull or a robber or evil spirits. Instead, the tall tree of human revenge, dressed up to look like justice, instantly bending its branches, loaded with mercy, like fruit. Look at their faces. They can't believe it's true. But their truth holds out, as when they manufactured it themselves. The scenes of distress, their crash and agony changed into carpentry and the needle's deliberate work. It's the same rough craft that made the sod cabin to defy the writ of eviction, the same bridge spanning the gully, fear which is everywhere, pushed back, and those truths which were nearly told at the wrong moment were able to wait. Just as tonight, the parent climbing the stairs after 3 warnings feels the brush of her sleeve, swallows back the word that can't be recalled if spoken, and goes quietly down again. I'll read. What am I doing? Yes, I'll read this one, which is the title poem. It's called Air, the Map of the World. When I was a child, there were still in circulation books of songs, mostly patriotic, with indications of what tune they were to be sung to. For example, An Bhín Sin Luachra, I remember as being given as the tune for some song or other. So I thought, if I want to write about music, it would be nice to start with that statement, Air, the Map of the World. Now, as far as I know, there isn't a tune called The Map of the World, but maybe somebody will write it. It's about, it was written actually for a volume in memory of Mícheál Súilleabháin, which ought to come out sometime soon. Sometimes you write a poem and then the book takes ages to appear, but so it has made its way into this book first. And there's something which is a true memory of people I met when traveling on the Innisfallen, well, taking the Innisfallen from Cork to Fishguard and then taking the train. I was on my way to Oxford, and people I met on that occasion. The map had told us already what would happen to the peoples of the West. Long promontories hurrying them out into the salty ocean fields, roads that twisted around inlets, constantly promising a place to rest. And yet invention does not falter. Just feel the tailor's clutch of the variously woven tweeds, ready for the scissors, the tacking, the silky lining. Listen. As the echoes are twisting into a macaronic language, listen to the places we came from, their stories elbowing each other out of the way. Can you recall the dripping walls of the library, the lads who were thought to be studying grammar to prepare for Maynooth, but instead they were planning their forays across the plains of Argentina. Up comes the prophecy I heard in the train, making the slow journey from Fishguard as far as the junction, when the big woman with red hair in the green and white dress with a gold belt and red shoes told us over and over, "They don't come back from America. They comes back from England, not America. They never comes back." And along the carriage, a man was playing an accordion. The cards were slapped down on suitcases. Do we not know about those journeys now, or how the accordion's long note spoke up in agreement, so that I could never have recalled her voice except for that music, its delays and provisos dividing up the time. I'm watching the time. I'm going to read this one, perhaps. Yes, this one is called A Shadow in Her Notebook. And it's about a woman I knew called Helen Maloney. She was the sister of my great friend Catherine Kavanagh, Patrick Kavanagh's widow, and she was a stained glass artist who made a sort of a living working in various churches, especially in Donegal. There was an architect who was enthusiastic about her work. But when she got a commission, as the poem says, she needed an idea first. So this is about an artist looking for ideas. And it's called A Shadow in Her Notebook. Helen Maloney, stained glass artist, 1926 to 2011. She sent a £10 note to the poor Clares and imagined them in their brown habits, praying for her to find an idea. That was a start. They sent her a fish, swimming and wavering, its head enormous in the dark water. They sent her a lion, then a star. She drew the lines of lead that held the sun in its place, that funneled the light through what was once the open air. The clouds paused on the mountain top, a gleam of weather somewhere else, then the storm pounding overhead before it slid off northward, a dark prow. The lion raised his paw, coloured like the sun, glowing now against a glass curtain, such a blue it seemed a kind of night. The darkened interior sucked in colours. Always the voice in her head objecting. But could it not just be clear glass? No. The shadow of the bell tower, the woman dressed in brown, a shadow behind a screen. They gathered around her clean white page, demanding indigo glass for the narrow, tight window and oyster white, a little off-centre, for the loaf. Just there on the border between the storm and the hush, the fish trembled in the light from the clouded sky, weaving like a hologram. On her page, the same tremble threw a swimming shadow that covered the chancel floor. Only the blind organist's daughter will ever see how it shivers, floated safe in empty air. I'm going to end with two poems about war, which were written in 2021. So I'm not laying any claim to prophetic powers, but they have acquired a bit more meaning since I wrote them. First one is called What Happened Next. So, will we ever be told what happened afterwards to the man who had fallen among thieves as he went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, half killed? What happened to him after the Samaritan paid for his care at the inn? Or what became of the women in Naples in 1944 who sold rough sex to soldiers in public for food, their faces never changing as they took it? How can I even ask? Who would I ask? Indeed, it was never the point of the story. Fiction or truth, it will be told again. This happened in my lifetime, in a place that I know. The moment the light falls on the victim, and then it moves away slowly, the light that also falls when there's nobody there to see it. When I begin the telling, the words will not be quiet. I have to lie down beside them and listen to the crackling syllables that keep beginning again each time the wheel of language spins. But they never tell what happened after the ending. They have so many stories, and not all have been heard already, and not all of them can tell us clearly what we ought to have done. And the last one I read is called Wartime, and it's also a poem about music. And I said at one point about this book, it's all right, there are no convents in it. And then I discovered there were 3 convents in it, that they had just got in without my noticing. Wartime. The convent now is full of women down on their luck, abandoned wives, mothers-in-law, nieces and daughters of men who needed to vanish for a while. Avoiding each other, waiting, reading a little, or sometimes wasting an hour drafting a letter, they slip upstairs to dig in backpacks, hunting for the last envelope with a real address. Where do they all sleep? The young ones camp in the refectory under the frescoed arch. The girl who finished in boarding school has nowhere to go now. Her home is beyond the new border. She practices scales on the tablecloth, breathing in 4/4 time. Then she begins the concerto, first with a gallop, then a long pause, counting the bars, her fingers held up in the air. It is time. The women have drifted singly down along the short path leading to the chapel. The sisters' voices heard as the door opens, a brief crescendo. At the edge of the table, she waits until a sign from her dead music mistress tells her to bring the spread fingers down. She holds the chord in place, pressing her foot into the floor, the note sinking into time, the time that's lost, the note so much older than the hand that conjures, filling the empty room. Thank you very much. Oh, sure, yeah, by all means.
Well, look, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Elaine, for that reading. So we're going to have a brief little Q&A session. If anyone in the audience has anything they had been wondering they'd like to pose to Elaine. No? Oh yeah, we have one from Africa, yeah. I could repeat that just into the mic. So Africa asked, what is Elaine's attraction to nuns and convents, and how do they make their way into the poems? Yeah.
It's, I suppose, a simple enough thing. I had 6, my father had 6 unmarried sisters. 3 of them were nuns, and the 3 who were nuns had a much livelier life than the 3 who remained at home. So that was interesting in itself. I was very friendly with the youngest of them, my Aunt Anna, and that made me sort of aware of their lives. My aunts lived a very pious life, probably about 50 years more old-fashioned than their nun sisters, and it seemed so different from anything else that was going on. It attracted me. Quite apart from that, of course, my generation went to convent schools. We were very used to things like the difference between the convent itself and the school, the way in which people were workers in one sphere and sisters in another. And then the history of nuns in Ireland is very interesting. Their legal position. The whole story of Nan O'Neill is fascinating because of her as I said, her resistance to the cloister, but the fact that there were lots and lots of women who wanted nothing more, apparently, than to be cloistered. It was, of course, an alternative to marriage for so many women who probably didn't particularly wish to marry, given some of the conditions available. So that, and the other thing about all this, of course, is because of my aunts, there was a sort of general feeling that wouldn't it be very nice if I became a nun? And I knew from a very early age that that was not on. So I had this resistance, and then when I started to write poetry, the nuns just turned up. There they were in the poems, and there was nothing to be done about it. So that's so exactly like what I said about thinking that there were no convents in this book, and then realizing that they were there all right. It seemed important. Convents are very interesting spaces. I mean, this one, I came here before the renovation. I was, when I saw that it was going to be changed, I just got on the train and made arrangements to see the place and see what the space was like and how it was used before it was changed. I'm delighted with its current condition. It's great that we're here. But its previous condition was a very interesting and ancient way of using space. So that's a long answer to a short question. Yes? Yes. I was the least musical member of a musical family. Well, not the least musical, because my father was the least musical, but my mother played the cello. She played when she was pregnant. And my sister and brother were very good. In particular, my younger sister, who died 30 years ago. But for us, it was the real image of art. Cork was very musical at that time. I played in the Cork Symphony Orchestra, not very well, but because I played the viola, I was in demand. It was somehow or other, literature, and my mother was a writer, literature was fine, but music was the real thing, was what we felt about. And the other thing, of course, is when you come to write poetry, things like rhythm, pace, and so on, are so terribly important that you're thinking in quasi-musical terms a lot of the time. And I just have found that I'm writing, as I get older, I'm still writing about music, and it's often there in the background to things that I write. Yes?
My question is related before you were telling that you are inspired from the moment before one orchestra is playing.
Yes.
I was wondering why, if you could explain more, and then if you will compare this passage with a sort of creativity process inside your writings.
So
Do you mind if I just repeat
okay, yes.
that for the people
Right,
at home?
yes.
Yeah, so Antonio was asking for Eiléan to kind of elaborate a bit about the bit of before a concert and what is that kind of energy that, and the second part of the question?
The creativity process,
Yes.
moment trigger.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, because what we played in the family was all string music, and tuning a violin is so terribly important. I remember at one point, just before my sister was able to tune her own violin, but when she was already playing very well, Sean O'Riordan, who was a student in UCC, used to come in and tune it for her. So the tuning, the getting ready, it's almost the planning of what it is you're going to play. It seemed to me to be a very good image of what you called it, the creative process. The time when you're saying, there's something I want to say, but what is it? And it's as if it wasn't, you haven't actually got the notes right yet, but something is happening. I always think a full orchestra is the most wonderful sight. I mean, just to watch an orchestra playing, or to watch a musician playing, to watch a singer can be, when she's getting ready to start sounding off, it can be in itself a spectacle, something to watch. And this is one of the reasons why I'm never quite happy with the combination of sound and visual, because I want to see the musicians, I want to see the instruments themselves. But there it is. People do write soundtracks and produce films with musical accompaniment, as we have seen. So yes, what it is with me is the intersection of watching the person and anticipating the music. But even also, if you're watching people dancing, some of them are standing still, but you know that the next thing is going to happen is they're going to start moving. And I find that a very exciting moment. And I just wanted to capture it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eiléan. I think we have to move on to the next slot, do we?
I think just one more.
We can have one more question. Okay, yeah.
Your name is in Irish, and Irish is tripped off your tongue very easily. I'm just wondering, does it have any place in your poetry?
Okay, the place of Gaeilge.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, as it happens, there are 3 poems in Irish. 4, is it 3 or 4 in this book, the new book? Only one of which is an original poem. In the collected poems, there are 2 poems, earlier poems in Irish. In other words, I do write occasionally in Irish. I've never lived in an Irish-speaking society, and therefore things don't come to me in Irish all that much. But the one in this book is called Cat Salaba, and I suppose it's because of something that happened when I was half asleep, the cat getting into the room and then needing to be let out. I suddenly realized that the words were coming to me at a very deep level, and therefore it became it became possible to write a poem. I'm going to write more poetry in Irish, I think, but I have to wait for the idea to come to me with Irish attached to it. All right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks again.
Well, there we have it, Eiléan Ní Chuilleanáin. It was a fantastic reading, very, very inspiring. And can we have a round of applause also for the film of her late husband and everyone who was involved in making that happen? Round of applause. And again, a thank you to Poetry Ireland and to Paul again for all of his hard work with making the winter warmer happen. All right, stick around, there's more on at 4 p.m. Yep, all right, thank you.